Welcome to Talk of the Bay. I'm Christine Barrington. Othering has always been an issue in human civilization, and the world is full of people who reflexively think different is synonymous with wrong. Luckily, the world is also full of people who seek to reach out with curiosity and build bridges of understanding over chasms of fear and distrust. My guests for this show are part of this global web of understanding, and they are leading efforts here in Santa Cruz to create new outcomes for challenging social problems through the cultivation of empathy, with programs offered in partnership with the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County. An event they offered this summer at the MA called Let's Talk About It offered innovative ways to find common threads through conversation. It was deeply impactful for those who experienced it, and through the ripple effect, new programs are being birthed in its wake, and we are here to talk about it. So my guests tonight are the Venerable Tenzin Choki, who is a certified teacher of compassion cultivation training and the Cultivating Emotional Balance program. She teaches workshops and programs that bridge the worlds of Buddhist thought, contemplative practice, mental and emotional cultivation, and the latest research in the field of positive psychology. She is passionate about social justice and has taught in prisons in the United States and internationally. She is featured right here on K-Squid on a monthly radio show called Reflections in Buddhism, and she serves as a training and curriculum specialist at the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County. Tenzin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great. I'm going to turn you up a little more. All right. Our next guest is Alaya Vautier. Is that how I say your last name?
Yes, that's
all right.
correct.
Vautier, who earned a graduate degree in international policy studies with a specialization in conflict resolution and negotiation. She has years of experience applying her training in a variety of challenging community settings. She serves as the Conflict Resolution Center's Restorative Justice Programs Director. She also designs and leads trainings on communication, conflict resolution, and restorative justice for the center, and she facilitates mediations and dialogues with youth in the juvenile justice system. Welcome, Alaya.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And we also have two other guests who are interns at the Conflict Resolution Center who attended the Let's Talk About It event this summer and were deeply impacted by it. Our first guest is Andy Ray, an intern, as I said, at the Conflict Resolution Center, and participated as one of the dialogue partners at the Let's Talk About It event representing their non-binary identity. Thank you, Andy, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. And finally, on the phone, we have Tyler Drogan, who was inspired by attending the Let's Talk About It event to become an intern at the Conflict Resolution Center and is organizing a new project, which we will be hearing more about in the first half of the show. Tyler, are you there? Welcome to the show.
I'm here. Thank
All
you
right.
very much for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us. And where are you at right now? Are you actually in Texas?
No, I'm not in Texas. I'm here in Santa Cruz.
You're here in Santa Cruz. All right. Well, thank
Yeah.
you. All right.
Yeah.
I had heard somebody might be calling from Austin. So anyway, thank you to all of my guests. And so Tenzin and Alaya, I'd like to start with the two of you to introduce our listeners to the Let's Talk About It event so that they understand the context of why I wanted to have the show. I interviewed you along with Suki Vesling about the event. I was super inspired and I couldn't go, and I wanted to do a follow-up because it sounded incredibly valuable. So I guess we'll start with you, Tenzin. Could you tell our listeners what this event was?
Sure. And we were inspired actually by a couple of similar ventures. Alaya had shared an article with all of us in our Conflict Resolution Center staff about a project called the Human Library, where people were brought together for 30-minute conversations, people of different identities. It started in Europe during the Syrian refugee crisis to try and build some bridges between the Syrian refugees and then the people in Northern Europe, the countries where the refugees were resettling. And so we were kind of inspired, and it started a conversation, and we thought of all of the, misunderstandings of people that represent certain identities in our own community. And the idea kind of took off from there, starting with an idea of having these 30-minute conversations, because the idea is if you meet another human being face to face and just talk to them and really kind of tune into their humanity, you can no longer hold these really solid stereotypical views of them. So that was kind of the jumping off point of the whole idea. And then we added a couple of other activities as well to the event, and partnered with the Ma that immediately agreed that it would be a wonderful thing to have in the community. So that's kind of how the project got started.
Wow. And so, Alaya, you helped create this event. What would you like to share with us about what inspired you in putting this together, and what might you add to what Tenzin shared?
Well, you read the news, you look at social media, and you see so much frustration and angst, and it feels like we're in low-grade civil war in this country. And you see all the anti-gay bills, anti-trans bills, and it's like we're in a culture war. And so, and it feels really uncomfortable. No matter what side of the war you happen to be on, it feels like we're being torn apart at our fabric. And so it inspired me, if we can start to mend that fabric and bring people together who have strong ideas about each other, or preconceived stereotypes or wrong ideas about each other, what would it be like to sit down with someone who maybe we disagree with, or maybe we're curious about, or maybe we don't quite understand, and get to know them a little better? Because as Tenzin said, once you get to know people, it's much harder to cause violence against them. It's much harder to hurt them. And we can begin to sew the tears of our social fabric back together and create a stronger community. And then we can stand up for people. And then maybe when we hear someone say something bad about someone, we go, well, wait a minute, I talked to this person with that identity. They actually weren't as bad as I thought they were. They're kind of interesting. I learned a little bit. They kind of questioned my stereotypes and my beliefs. And you start to kind of rebuild a new thought process about these people. And hopefully we can create a stronger community through that process.
Oh, I have no doubt we can create stronger community through the process. And that's why I'm excited to hear that you're planning to do another event next summer, but we'll get to that. And so before I pivot to talk to Andy and Tyler, could you just share a little bit more detail? People came and they got, there were a variety of people like Andy who volunteered to offer a conversation. Could you explain the format, like maybe 5 different categories?
We had actually, I think, 12 categories. We kind of had to narrow it down depending on the space that we had, because we wanted to have enough little tables for a one-on-one conversation. And so we did it at the outdoor courtyard at the Ma outside, which was also kind of COVID responsible to have the conversations happening outside. And then we had some art projects and other things in the atrium. So Alaya and I worked really hard to kind of first brainstorm a list of identities that we thought would be useful, but then because of the space constraints, we had to narrow it down to 12. And so that was an interesting process to do that, and to say, who did we feel was the most misunderstood, or what voices did we really want to bring in, in terms of our own specific community too, because a lot of it was like, what are the issues? For example, we had people who were unhoused, because that's such a big issue here in Santa Cruz, and we thought, how many people have never sat down and had a half-hour conversation with someone who experienced homelessness, for example? So things like that we really wanted to bring to the table. So that was a big part of the event, and that was kind of the main focus, was these dialogues. So we had a bunch of little tables set out in the courtyard. We had a place where people could kind of register for a conversation with somebody of the identity that they wanted to talk to.
Right, and so you had like a Muslim individual, right?
Yeah.
A Republican who's...
Yes.
I loved that, right? Marginalized in Santa Cruz, which I could imagine.
Yeah.
And Andy represented the non-binary community, which I'm going to get to you in just a moment, Andy. So those were kind of examples of I don't know that I've ever had an in-depth discussion with, say, a Muslim
Yes.
person.
And
right?
I think the Muslim person, the evangelical Christian, the police officer, and the Republican were the most requested identities. We kind
Wow.
of kept track of like how many. We
Interesting.
also had two indigenous representatives, one of the local Amamutsan tribal band, and then one whose parents are from other places in the U.S. and one parent from Canada. We had a trans man and a trans woman also represented. We had a Black Lives Matter activist represented. We had a genderqueer two-spirit person. Who else did we have? I'm trying to remember all the identities. Those were the main ones, I think. Oh, Asian American refugee. Yeah, thanks, Andy.
Oh, these are great categories.
Yeah.
And so if people signed up to have a conversation, they would be given some parameters to make sure
Yes.
that the conversation was respectful, but they
Yes.
also had permission to ask a lot of questions.
That's right. That's right. And we just said as long as it was respectful, and then we called the people who were representing the identities dialogue partners, and so we gave them a training ahead of time, and told them that if anybody asked anything that was too personal or intrusive, that they were completely welcome to say, oh, I'd rather not talk about that. And then the people who requested the dialogues were also told, hey, if somebody says, hey, I'd rather not talk about that, just to accept that. So we gave them a couple of parameters for the conversations. And also, Elia had a great idea to give them some starter questions, some kind of icebreakers in case they were at a loss. Some people used them, some people didn't use them at all. So we had a handout, like a laminated sheet with the guidelines on one side and then some of the prompts, potential prompts. And some of those prompts we got from the dialogue partners as part of training them. They said, oh, why don't you have them ask us this? And one of the questions was, why did you volunteer to represent your identity? Like, what was
Wonderful.
important to represent your identity? So
this
was
is so
cool.
powerful, and it kind of speaks to with all the forces of division and just how big our culture is, and we don't have communal ways where we're taught how to commune and communicate with each other, that we do have to do all this preparation in order for it to go through this positive channel for good outcomes. So, and in case you're just wondering what we're talking about, if you've just tuned in, this is KSQD Santa Cruz on 90.7 FM. You're listening to Talk of the Bay. I'm Christine Barrington, and we are speaking with people from the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County about an amazing event that they did last summer called Let's Talk About It. And I want to now pivot to you, Andy. Andy Ray, you volunteered to be one of the dialogue partners, and I would like to give you some time to share with us, like, why were you willing to step forward? How did you hear about it? And then I'll ask you a few more questions. And before you answer, I'd like to invite you to pull that mic closer to your mouth.
Okay. Like this?
Even closer, maybe.
Oh,
Great. Okay. There you go.
So I found out about the event mostly because I interned with the program, and it was kind of funny. They were talking about the event in a meeting that I was at, and they were like, we can't find a non-binary person. And I was like, I'm a non-binary person. I can do that. And I think I wanted to participate in the event because it's a mission that I really believe in. I think that the goal of the event and the idea of we can get these people together who maybe don't understand each other, don't understand each other's identities, and have that conversation. And I really believe that once you have the conversation with somebody of a certain identity, it is really hard to then go and be like, oh, all people of that identity are just like this, or it's hard to hold on to those preconceived ideas of what a person would be like if you've actually sat down and had a conversation. And I think that's something that I've always been drawn to doing. I like to, educate people in my life or talk to people in my life that I meet about my experiences so that it will bring more understanding. Because especially being non-binary is so misunderstood, and I think that not everyone wants to explain everything all the time, but for me it feels purposeful to be able to have that conversation with the person and be able to share my story and be able to see them kind of realize or learn something from my experience. And that was really meaningful.
So in that vein, I was telling somebody in my community, they were like, what show are you doing tonight? And I said, this is the show I'm doing tonight. And one of the guests was a dialogue partner representing non-binary community. And they said, what does that mean? So here's your opportunity. Could you share with our listeners? Because many, this is so in the current culture. It's getting talked about, and yet there's still so much to learn and understand. How would you explain what being non-binary means?
Well, I think it just means not identifying within the binary of man or woman. And I think that I can only speak from my own definition, because everybody who identifies as non-binary has a different reason, has a different understanding of it. But for me, I simply just don't, in my life, I don't fit into the category of man or woman that is offered to us. We're offered one of these two categories, and so much as I have tried in my life to do one or the other, I've never been good at fitting one or the other box. And so that's why I say that I'm non-binary, because it literally feels like my life experience is that of a person who does not fit into one of those two boxes.
Okay. Well, beautiful. We're going to come back to your experience at Let's Talk About It, but I want to bring in Tyler. Tyler, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Hey, so you attended this event, and my understanding was you felt really impacted by it and it inspired you. And so could you share with our listeners a little bit about the context of what brought you to the event and what your experience was, and why you were willing to join us on the show tonight?
Yeah, so I actually reached out to the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz prior to the event, and the director of the CRC, Conflict Resolution Center, is Layla. So my curiosity kind of originally just came from an interest in conflict and the ways that we can mediate or reduce conflict or solve conflict. It's something that I've been curious about for a while, and after learning about the CRC, I reached out to see if there were any ways that I could get involved. And it just so happened to be about a week or so before the Let's Talk About It event. And after making contact with Layla, she said, why don't you come on down to the event, see what it's all about, have an opportunity to meet us, and we can kind of go from there. So I attended the Let's Talk About It event as a participant, and I had the opportunity to have a 30-minute conversation with the Asian American refugee dialogue partner, which I found to be a very interesting conversation. I think what was really special about it is it was in a setting where, I think it was mentioned before, we had permission to be very direct and open with our questions, of course staying respectful, but it kind of created an environment where we could really just follow our curiosity and learn about each other, whereas out in public, the opportunity to have those kinds of conversations may not arise as often. So we could really just jump into it and ask each other whatever we were curious about the other person. So I came away from the event really enjoying the conversation, really appreciating and enjoying the people that I met. I believe I met Tenzin there as well. And yeah, it was a very positive experience in all.
And my understanding is that you actually want to take this a little further and start a program yourself. Could you speak to that a little bit?
So, yeah, my interest was just to be involved with the CRC and see what they're doing, find a way that I could be involved with the CRC. And after the event, I had some discussions with Layla, and she asked me to take over or kind of restart a program that the CRC had done in the past that they had called listening zones. So the way that this program works is a table and chairs are set up in a public space, and CRC volunteers sit at some of the seats and have some open seats available for anybody that's interested to come and sit down and have an opportunity to just say whatever it is that they want to say, whether it's happy or sad, positive and negative, just an opportunity to speak about what's going on with them and in their world. And I think this kind of came out of the idea that the opportunities to do this in our everyday lives are somewhat limited. We have conversations with individuals. These conversations are kind of back and forth in format. Advice may be given to somebody if they're kind of seeking counsel, but it's somewhat rare to have an opportunity to have somebody who's willing to sit down with you and simply listen to what you have to say to them. Simply listen to whatever is on your mind without necessarily offering advice or telling you what you should do or how you should behave or anything like that. Just a space to listen. And so since the Let's Talk About It event, along with the help and support of the CRC and the help and support of volunteers at CRC, we've held a number of these listening zones around Santa Cruz County. It's all kind of been a learning process, but it's been really special to be bringing this service, if you will, to members of Santa Cruz County.
Thank you, Tyler. That's a good introduction, and I have many, many questions going through my mind. So first of all, these listening zones, can you give me one example of where you've held one of these?
Yeah, so we held several at the downtown farmers market in downtown Santa Cruz. That's held every Wednesday. We held one at the Live Oak Farmers Market, and we held one at Cabrillo College, I think a week ago today, last Monday. So we're still, like I said, it's a learning process. We're still learning where, what environment creates opportunities for people to step forward and want to share something or want to sit down and share something. But yeah, we've had at all the events, we've had a number of people come forward. I could imagine it takes overcoming your fear to be able to sit down and talk to a stranger about something that's on your mind. But luckily, people have stepped forward to do it.
Beautiful. Okay, so now we've set the stage. There's many beautiful places we can go with all of this. So before we do, we're going to need to take a short break, and we will be back with more from the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County about the ways that they are helping to create empathy through skillful listening events here in Santa Cruz. I'm Christine Barrington with Talk of the Bay, and we will be right back right after this short break. Welcome back to Talk of the Bay. I'm Christine Barrington. The Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County is a local leader in bridging the divides that separate us and creating programs to cultivate empathy through skillful listening. We are talking about their recent event called Let's Talk About It and exploring the powerful ripple effects born of finding common threads through conversation. My guests are the Venerable Tenzin Choki, Training and Curriculum Specialist at the CRC, Alaya Vautier, CRC's Restorative Justice Programs Director, Tyler Drogan, a CRC intern, and Andy Ray, also an intern at the CRC. So we've now set the stage and introduced this event and this idea that when we offer ourselves in conversation and we give people we set container and environment where people can ask deeper questions, more penetrating questions, and then we can share in a deeper way. And we're given permission to do this. We kind of transcend the socializing paradigm that just seems to rule almost all our interactions unless we're going to a therapist or something, right? And something happens. Like I notice that when I go to a workshop, I go in and there's all these people I don't know, and my barriers are kind of up and my issues are up, right? Maybe my wounds about, not being liked or whatever. But then I always remind myself every time I do this, I leave and I'm in love with everybody. So then what I say to myself is, who am I going to fall in love with this time, right? That just given the chance to share this amazing, this empathy, this connection that we're just built for as human beings comes through. So, Tyler, I want to pivot back to you, and I want to ask you, in this conversation with this Asian American refugee, can you share something that touched you about that conversation, that dialogue you had?
Yeah, it was a number of months ago, but I think what really stuck with me and what really impacted me was her journey out of her country and to come to the United States. I don't remember the specifics, but it was a journey that was filled with a lot of danger and a lot of risk, and required a lot of bravery on her part and her family's part. And, myself growing up here in the United States, that is an experience that I myself have never faced. And it was really kind of eye-opening to hear that from a person that I was talking to who I wouldn't have known that about them if we didn't have that opportunity to kind of have that conversation and connect in that really direct way. So that was probably the most impactful part of the conversation on me.
Beautiful. Thank you. We're going to come back to you, but I want to pivot over to Andy and say, as a dialogue partner, what was something that touched you about the interactions that you had?
Well, I actually had a few moms of transgender children come to speak to me, and I felt that was one of the most meaningful parts of the event for me, because I got to talk to them and kind of give them some advice about what I would have wanted when I was younger from my mom, and it was just a really great opportunity for me to get to share with them me and my own mother. She's amazing now, but we've had a rocky relationship with my transness over the years, and so it was really nice to be able to share some of the mistakes that we made with each other with these moms, and kind of help them maybe avoid some of those problems. And I think that that wasn't something that I was expecting to happen at the events, and it was just a really lovely surprise, and I really felt very fulfilling for me to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, my understanding is human beings love to be helpful.
Yeah.
That they actually, I don't know if you've heard about this study where they put people who were in the carceral system, really quote unquote hardcore criminals, in MRIs, and then showed them all these images and showed them images of violence and domination and of love and of connection. And they thought the criminal brain, people can't see my air quotes, the criminal brain would light up with the scenes of domination, but they didn't. Their brains lit up seeing scenes of love and connection and helping each other. This is what we're built for. I always say human beings are built for love. And the conflict stuff comes up and gets in the way. So that's why, Tyler, I love it that you are interested in this issue of conflict resolution. Alaya, this has been your life's work, right? I was told I've been interested in community building, and Starhawk is a woman who's been doing community building for a very, very long time. And she said to me, there's only one thing that you can have guaranteed in a community, and that's conflict. So if you're wise, you'll learn how to harvest wisdom out of conflict, right? And so now back to you, Tenzin and Alaya. What do you think of that?
I'm going to pass the baton to Alaya.
Yes.
She's the expert.
You're the expert, Alaya. You've been
Hardly.
doing... It's a big field, isn't it? Tell me.
Definitely
Cheryl,
not an expert, but
yeah.
Conflict can be, as they say, generative, right? It can be destructive or it can be generative. We can use it to cause great harm, or we can use it to learn and grow and build. The tagline of the CRC is always conflict is inevitable, but the way we can learn to deal with it can be extremely helpful and useful and can grow. And I remember this one time I was at I was hanging out at Ideal Bar and Grill, and it was like a daytime. We're hanging out, we're having drinks, and I got in this conversation with this guy there, and he was very for the border wall that Trump was building, and I had strong opinions against it. And so we went at it for a few minutes, trading all our reasons why our opinions were better. And then I was like, you know what? I'm a mediator. Put my skills to use. So I put my skills to use, and I inquired, and I was curious, and I shifted my lens, and I started, asking questions. Why do you think like this? And it got to the bottom of it was that this guy, his mom was a drug addict, and he was so impacted by that growing up. And so his idea is if we had that wall, then drugs wouldn't make it into the United States. And that would prevent so many people from having to experience the harm that he experienced. And it just shifted my view of him and his opinions so completely that after that we really connected. We didn't agree on the wall after that, but we could see each other's humanity. And so we took this conflict and we turned the corner with it and was like, okay, you're a human. I can support you. You can support me. And if we were politicians, we might work together on policies going forward rather than against each other because we'd made a human connection. And so conflict can lead to healing.
It certainly can. And so, Tyler, since we've got you on the line and you are interested in conflict, learning more about it, could you speak to what's arising in you as you hear this conversation?
Yeah, I find it fascinating, first of all. And I like the allegory that Elia just shared. I think for me, what has kind of come to the surface recently in my own personal life and through work with CRC is, as you touched on earlier, we live in such a charged and divided social environment at the time. And it can be very easy to hear somebody's surface political position and make assumptions about their underlying character and values. And I think often in my experience, my assumptions about underlying character and values have often been incorrect when I've gotten to know the individual on a person-to-person basis. And, kind of from that, I would say that the conversations in my life in the past year or 6 months that I feel like I have grown the most from and learned the most from have been with people who have differing opinions than me. So I think it can be difficult to initiate and have those conversations when they're around topics that maybe kind of set off alarm bells and whistles in my head. But if I have the ability to press through that and kind of calm down and listen to what the other person has to say and hear where they're coming from, the underlying experiences or values that kind of underpin their positions, then it goes a long way in being able to see them as humans or understand them as humans and, lead to really just understanding and empathizing with different points of view.
It's a very exciting challenge, to see all, like you talked about, Elia, that we're in a low grade, maybe a medium grade civil war right now. It's been really scary. And so I see people that are like, embrace conflict as very heroic. And we see these movies and they're like, shoot them up, smash them up. We win through our guns and our power. And I'm like, let's have a movie about the superheroes who exercise compassion and empathy and skill, right? To build connection, because that's what makes us the most human, are the ways that we connect. And so, Tenzin, your expertise is compassion, teaching compassion and emotional regulation. And I think that I'd really like to just have you riff on what you've been listening to so far. I mean, like we said, we could just talk forever about the topic of empathy. It's huge and it's so important today. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about this today because I have another event tomorrow that is on the topic of fear and resilience and just our, response to a threat, you know, and we think about our response to a threat, fight, flight, freeze, sometimes appease, sometimes collapse, submit, these different strategies that we have. And much is made, I think, of our innate tribalism, but equally we have innate empathy and compassion, and not as much is made out of that. And I think people are just lazy, basically, and they're like, oh, we're just innately tribal, so of course, you know, I want my side to win and everybody who looks and thinks like me. But we're overlooking so much research that shows that we're equally empathic and compassionate. And I think the key is, you know, as my friends have been saying, that way of connecting to the commonalities of our human experience. In our CRC trainings, we have a graphic we use a lot of an iceberg, and above the waterline is your position, like Eli's example of talking to this man who had a completely different position about the border wall. But we say under the waterline is interests and needs, and we all have the same, you know, basic human needs. And when we can connect to that, and it might be some of the basic ones, safety, belonging, respect, or dignity. I really like that very short list. Mm-hmm. And if we can relate, oh, you have a completely different position, but your position is informed by your need for safety and belonging.
Right.
I get that. And then your heart softens, and then the connection is there. And so for me, that is just absolutely key to all of it. And I kind of feel like that's the thread that ties all of these projects together, that ties the compassion trainings, that, you know, the contemplative science, which I'm so interested in, is just that. And it's so simple, and it just takes a shift of perspective. Like, we can stay in our tribal, you know, silos, or we can just open to that other aspect of our human nature that is also there and accessible to us, you know, and it's a choice. It's a choice we can make. So
it's a choice that we can make, and we can make it more easily if we're offered the training and the skills. Because a fact that I love to refer to is the fact that our brain is biased toward the negative.
Yeah.
And it takes 1 second to lay down a negative memory. You know, it's just instantaneous, but to lay down a positive memory into our permanent brain structure, it has to last 12 seconds. So it's a 12 to 1 ratio. So we really need to cultivate our skillfulness around connection, around understanding that we can create greater safety for ourselves and the other. And in the long term, creating safety for ourselves and each other is creating safety for our community, our region, our country, and our planet. Yeah. And in case you've just tuned in and you are wondering what we are talking about, who we are talking to, this is Talk of the Bay on KSQD Santa Cruz 90.7 FM. I'm Christine Barrington, and we are talking about the ways that the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County is leading efforts in this region to create new outcomes for challenging social problems through the cultivation of empathy and skillful listening. And we're going to be back with more with my guests right after this very short break. Welcome back to Talk of the Bay. I'm Christine Barrington, and as I said before our break, we're talking with representatives from the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County about their efforts to increase empathy in our region through skillful listening. And so, Tenzin, I'm wondering, you know, we've heard from Andy Ray, Tyler Drogan about a little bit about their experiences, but there were a lot of people who participated. What did you hear about what people experienced during Let's Talk About It this summer?
Yeah, you know, I mean, for one thing, when Eli and I were planning it, we had no idea who would come, if anybody was going to be interested. We kept joking, going, well, we could have 5 people or 500. We have no idea. And actually, hundreds of people came. The tables with the dialogue partners were completely filled for the whole afternoon,
wow.
Which, we had no idea what to expect. We had a couple of other art, kind of interactive art things that people could participate in and some other things. But one of the things I wasn't expecting, I was Alaya and I were both like looking for people to be dialogue partners, and that was quite a task of finding all the identities that we wanted represented. I think I knew how transformative it was going to be for the participants, the members of the public, to have these conversations. But what was so surprising and gratifying to me was the dialogue partners' experience, sitting there for hours representing their identity, especially the ones, there were a couple of the dialogue partners that had never actually been in that position at all to speak publicly about their identity. And I remember one in particular was quite nervous to sit there, and she was expecting she might get some hard questions. Actually, three I'm thinking of, all three of them were a little, had some trepidation. They thought they were going to be challenged. And all three of them at the end were just glowing. They were like, people were so respectful. They said, we got hard questions, but people were respectful. I got to talk about my identity and why it was important for me to represent. And that blew me away. Somehow I just wasn't expecting that. I was so focused on the experience for the participants that I wasn't thinking about the experience of the people who were involved. So that was beautiful. I loved hearing that. One participant was so nervous at the beginning, and at the end she just couldn't stop hugging me. It was so cute.
It's so beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't quite have words for this feeling. And it's amazing, like, what are the chemicals that go through our system and our nervous system when we hear these stories, and our humanity goes to, this elevated place.
Absolutely.
And I would love to see more opportunities for us to experience this. And there is going to be another opportunity. And since we're talking about it, let's talk about it right now. You're going to do this event again.
Yeah.
Right?
So immediately, our executive director, Leila Bratovic, and everybody who was involved was like, we have to do this again. This was so amazing, so successful. So we contacted the museum, and they said, absolutely. We got a date on the calendar, and I think it's June 17th, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's June 17th next year. Stay tuned, everybody.
We'll do another interview before that. We will. We'll help broadcast
and
that.
To basically do it again. And we talked to the museum about having this is just an annual event. The venue was perfect. This courtyard with all the little tables, the atrium where we had the art projects and the interactive tables and other things. So it was really kind of the perfect venue, and the museum was just so gracious. Basically opened up their storeroom, let us use all of their equipment. We just pulled out everything, and
this is a true community. It's just like a highlight of what can be accomplished in the community.
Absolutely.
Yes, Alaya?
We couldn't have done it without, I think we had 45 volunteers.
Yes.
Like huge community show outs. Some were CRC volunteer mediators, some were our neighbor courts volunteers, some were folks who know Tenzin, and some were just people from the community, and they all showed up. And it was a huge coordination of all these people to help with the dialogue partners, help with the snacks, help with the check-ins, help direct people, move people here, there. Yeah. We had all these interactive art tables. We had the scheduling was this huge and massive undertaking. We didn't, we learned a lot through that. And so they showed up in such a huge way that made this event possible, because it was just Tenzin and I, and we couldn't have done it without 45 incredible generosity.
And I'm seeing Andy nodding. You're nodding your head. What's going through your mind right now?
Oh, just that, the turnout of both people just coming to the event, but also all of the people that showed up to help. It was mind blowing. I don't know that I've ever seen such a big coordinated event like that, and it was really successful.
Oh, so it's time to just really land and cultivate that gratitude for all the people in the community that made this possible, and how meaningful it is that people would choose to want to do this. And so I want to ask, if people are listening and they're like, wow, I want to be a part of this next June, who should they contact?
Alaya at crcsantacruz.org.
Alaya at CRC. Say that again really clearly.
So Alaya actually coordinated these 45 volunteers and just this amazing job, created 15 Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Alaya at crcsantacruz.org or Tenzin at crcsantacruz.org.
That's great.
That's right.
And there is a blog post already up on our website about this show. I will amend that with that contact
Okay, awesome.
information.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, wow, I'm loving this show, I want to be a part of this community event, or I want to, I don't know, be reminded when it's going to happen. I don't want to miss it. This sounds really special. And so speaking of special, also, I want to come back to you, Tyler. You've been so patient hanging out there. Are you still there? Or did you fly away?
Nope, I'm here.
Awesome. So we've been talking for a while, and I just want to bring your voice back in. What's been going on through you? And also, if people want to find some of these listening zones, how might they track you down?
Yeah, so with me, we will be holding the listening zones through the holiday season, and then we'll kind of revisit and see where things are at, and see if or how we want to move forward with that. We don't have any scheduled right now, but we've kind of just been doing them as pop-up events. I think it's very likely that we will be holding several in between now and New Year's. I wish I had one scheduled that I could kind of blast out here to your listeners, but at the current time we don't. But following that, my involvement with CRC, I plan to do the community mediation training that CRC will be offering in January and February, and then hope to be volunteering with CRC, mediating some of their disputes in one or more of the programs that they have there.
Ooh.
So that's kind of my end goal with CRC, is to learn and practice mediation skills.
I've got more warm fuzzies. Alaya, a mediation training. Can you tell us about that?
Tenzin's actually the training coordinator.
Okay, Tenzin, can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So usually once a year, we have our big community mediators training. The whole thing is a 40-hour training. So it trains you through the whole process to be a community mediator. And these are the volunteers that we use. Many of the people at the event were our mediators that we use. And so CRC, since 1986, in our founding, that was the main thing that CRC did for many, many years, is provide free community mediation to keep things out of the court system, basically. So if there was a disagreement between neighbors, a landlord-tenant disagreement, just something going on that could be dealt with, with skilled mediators. And so that's one of the major projects that CRC does. And of course, we always need volunteers for that. So once a year,
You mean volunteers to get trained?
volunteer mediators. All of our mediators are volunteers. So the
Great.
people that mediate these disputes in the community are all volunteers. And so once a year we offer a training. Last year we did it on Zoom, and we had people from all over the country. We had a man who wanted to start a kind of a conflict resolution center, a mediation center. I think it was in Ohio, somewhere in the Midwest, and he came to our training. There was another person who was a school teacher that was thinking about a change of career, who came to the training. And so this year we're going to be doing it on Zoom as well in January and February, and that's on our website. If you just Google Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz, there's a training page, and the information for that training with all the dates and details are on that page.
That's incredible. And is that free?
It's not free.
Okay.
It's not free. In fact, there's an early bird rate until I think December 15th is the early bird rate, and then after that the price goes up. We need 12 people to run it. It's between 12 and 16 people in order to hold it.
Right.
And so it's a very, very detailed, very involved training. A little bit time, it's a commitment in terms of time.
I imagine
But
it's an life-changing and incredible skill base
It
to
really is,
amass.
And
Wow.
lots and lots of practice. We teach the basic skills and then do role plays that are supervised role plays. So people play the roles of the disputants and the roles of the mediator, and then there's a facilitator in the role play coaching, and there's many of those as part of the training. So you really get hands-on. I mean, it's a role play,
Wow.
but you get hands-on. And then after the people finish the training, they're invited to observe panels, with experienced mediators for as long as they feel they would like to become comfortable before they start doing it on their own. So we have a whole process of people kind of advancing to be a community mediator.
Wow, that's an incredible resource, and a lot of us need to train in mediation to navigate this world skillfully and successfully.
And we also have a one-day training. It's scheduled for January 7th, which is the prerequisite for the mediators training, and it's called Conflict Management Skills Training. And so that's a public training that even if people don't want to commit to the full mediators training, it's a 6-hour training in basic conflict management skills. So that's another level of training that we do.
Great. I'm so glad that we had a chance to let you plug that. It's very valuable community information. And so we have a few minutes left. And so I want to pivot back and bring, Andy, your voice into this. I'm really curious, what has drawn you to be an intern at the CRC?
Well, I'm actually an intern specifically with the Neighborhood Courts program, which is a program that is a collaboration with the District Attorney's Office and the CRC, and it's a restorative justice-based program that diverts people out of the criminal justice system who have committed low-level misdemeanor crimes, and basically gives them an opportunity to talk about what happened and to make amends for what they have done, and have the opportunity to not go through the court system. And so that is something that is really an issue that's close to my heart. I've always had, a problem with the way that the court system works and, the way that people get caught up in it. And so having the opportunity to work with neighborhood courts has been really meaningful to me, in that I get to help divert people away from that and give people a chance to actually talk about what happened, rather than just kind of going through the motions of trying to get their case taken away, right. Trying to say that they haven't done what they did. And so that's been really great opportunity.
That's inspiring. And I love how you speak to this. It gives people a chance to speak to what they did, make amends, move through it, and have healing on both sides, versus gaming the system, right? Mm-hmm. Which we kind of have to do. Well, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. And I want to, Tyler, before we go, is there any last words you would like to share?
There was nothing that I was thinking of, but I really appreciate you bringing us on, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here and share what we've been doing with the listening zones. And it's been a really wonderful experience to be involved with CRC. So I'm feeling a lot of gratitude.
Beautiful. Thank you for joining us. And this has been a very valuable program. So we have about 3 minutes left. And so you did this event, you designed it. It just feels like this heartbeat of warmth going through our community. And I'm really grateful to learn more about the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz. It sounds like you are doing many, many things, including, you've touched on, Andy, the Restorative Justice Program, Alaya, which you head up at the CRC. And this is also tremendously important work, and I would love to have you back maybe in February to get into it. Maybe, Andy, you would come back with us, get a few people to talk about this. Could you sort of give us an encapsulation of what that is?
Yeah, well, the restorative justice programs here at the CRC are a handful of different programs that work with both youth and adults. We do a parent-teen mediation program. Those are usually youth that have been involved in the juvenile justice system. We do victim offender dialogue programs for youth, and we're also doing a pilot program called the Reconciliation Project with adults, working on setting up dialogues for people who've caused more greater harm, to meet with the people they've caused harm to talk about what happened and understand the impacts and see what harm needs to be repaired. The Neighborhood Courts program, which Andy spoke really well about. We do victim awareness education workshops for both youth and adults. both in the system and out of the system. And that's just the restorative justice programs. And then the Conflict Resolution Center itself does other mediation programs, small claims court, workplace, community mediation, and training. Is that it? I always forget.
That is rich. It just sounds like there's more that we can continue to talk about here at K-Squid Community Radio for the Central Coast. So Tenzin, with a few seconds left, any last words?
Well, thank you so much for having us on. We're hoping to create more of these types of community dialogues. We're hoping to do bigger community dialogues about some of the pressing issues like homelessness and some of the issues. So stay tuned. We're hoping Let's Talk About It will be a whole umbrella of related programs to add on to all the wonderful things that we already do. So thank you so much for giving us the chance to talk about it.
It's a we talked about it, and we're going to talk about it some more. Thank you so much. And you've been listening to KSQD Santa Cruz on 90.7 FM, Talk of the Bay. I'm Christine Barrington, and coming up next is First Person Singular. Thank you all for joining me.